Hello again from Metro Manila, the Philippines, Southeastern Asia, and welcome back to my channel, or my main YouTube channel rather. And this video lesson's topic is, or rather are, the human ethnic groups, or an introduction to them. The ethnic groups are a much more accurate form of classifying humans than the so-called races. Of course, even the ethnic groups are all, or most of them are mixed. Only some isolated ethnic groups in certain parts of Asia, Oceania, Africa, and Latin America, and well, possibly the polar regions, are ones that could be classified as rather pure ones compared to many other ones. Are the ethnic groups determined by their native languages? To some extent, yes, but by no means completely. And then there are many ethnic groups that regularly use at least two languages or mixtures of two or more languages as their forms of communication. For example, here in the Philippines, many Filipinos mix English with Tagalog or Visayan or Cebuano or Ilocano. And then there are so-called Creole languages, so rather basic mixtures of Indo-European languages and native languages that are spoken. For example, the Tok Pisin language, which is spoken, I think, in parts of Papua New Guinea. Of course, the levels of education vary, not just between many ethnic groups, but also inside many ethnic groups. Well, for example, we Finns. Some Finns believe that the Finland Swedes, in other words, the ethnically and linguistically, as far as their native language is concerned, Swedish people whose ancestors moved to Finland, depending on the region, over 1,000 years ago or several hundreds of years ago, are just as much Finns as we so-called Finnish Finns. Certain Finnish nationalists, however, believe that the Finland Swedes are actually a separate ethnic group, because they are not supposedly pure Finns, or at least not as purely Finnish as the so-called Finland Finns, if we may call them by such a name. Sorry. And then in such multi-ethnic countries as, notably the United States, Canada, Brazil, Britain, France, Germany, Russia, India, Indonesia, South Africa, to some extent Malaysia, even the Philippines. It is challenging to accurately describe people, even by referring to their ethnic groups. Often, the classification is rather arbitrary and goes back maybe only 2 generations, so to each individual's parents and grandparents. Because if we go back more generations of than that, 3, 4, 5, 6, or even more generations, we then run into difficulties such as how to classify ancestors who have an ethnically mixed heritage, and what about those ancestors whose heritage is simply not known because of inaccurate or missing birth records. Then to some extent we rely on the facial and other forms of physical appearance, to some extent on the native language or languages, spoken by people, although a significant number of children and teenagers, probably a growing one, are being brought up as bilingual or perhaps even trilingual, or in truly language-loving families as quadri or quinto or even sextolingual children and teenagers. Even in such cases, the mother tongue would still be considered as the first tongue that the child or the teenager has learned to speak. But let's now go to Wikipedia. An ethnic group or an ethnicity is a category of people who identify with each other based on similarities such as common ancestry, language, history, society, culture, or nation. Ethnicity is usually an inherited status based on the society where a person lives. Membership of an ethnic group tends to be defined by a shared cultural heritage, ancestry, origin myth, history, homeland, language, or dialect. Symbolic systems such as religion, mythology, and ritual, foods and drinks or cuisine, dressing style, art, or physical appearance. Ethnic groups derived from the same historical founder population often continue to speak related languages and share a similar gene pool. By way of language shift, acculturation, adoption, and religious conversion, it is sometimes possible for individuals or groups to leave one ethnic group and become part of another, except for ethnic groups emphasizing homogeneity or racial purity as a key membership criterion. Ethnicity is often used synonymously with terms such as nation or people. In English, it can also have the connotation of something exotic. So in other words, held by people who come from different countries and often also from different continents. In English, for example, an ethnic restaurant, generally related to cultures of more recent immigrants, in other words, first or second generation ones who arrived after the dominant population of an area was established. The largest ethnic groups in modern times comprise hundreds of millions of individuals, the Han Chinese being the largest. While the smallest are limited to a few dozen individuals, numerous indigenous peoples worldwide. And these people are in danger of becoming extinct because of intermarriages or other intimate relationships with more dominant ethnic groups, call them nations or tribes or whatever, or whoever, and also becoming linguistically extinct. For example, probably most of the 20 or so Finno-Ugric or Uralic languages are in danger of becoming extinct, even in the first half of this 21st century. Finnish, fortunately, is not one of them. But already some languages related to Finnish, such as certain dialects of the Karelian language, are in danger of becoming extinct. The Veps or Vepsian language, the Votic language, the Livonian language, no longer after the death of its last known native speaker, Ms. Griselda Cristinha in Canada in June 2013, has had no known native speakers. However, up to 210 people, according to the English language Wikipedia article on Livonian, can speak or understand it to a certain extent. And one of the rather few people who have learned the language as a non-native language fluently is Miss Julgi Stalte, who is a Livonian folk musician. Larger ethnic groups may be subdivided into smaller subgroups known variously as tribes or clans, who over time may become separate ethnic groups themselves due to endogamy or physical isolation from the parent group. Conversely, formerly separate ethnicities can merge to form pan-ethnicity and may eventually merge into one single ethnicity. Whether through division or amalgamation, the formation of a separate ethnic identity is referred to as ethnogenesis. So, let's go to ethnic groups by continent. Ethnic groups in Africa, most of them are black-skinned, or at least tending towards black-skinned. The ethno-linguistic groups include various Afro-Asiatic, Khoisan, Niger, Congo, and Nilo-Saharan populations, so named after the River Nile and the large and expanding desert Sahara. Africa's official population count by the various ethnic groups is highly uncertain because in quite many African countries still the roads are of rather poor quality. There aren't many airports, there aren't many bridges and so forth. And there are not so many computers or database centers available to conduct censuses, and because Africa's population is still, despite various diseases, not the smallest of which is AIDS, especially in sub-Saharan Africa, and emigration, and then civil wars and other conflicts, and malnutrition and hunger. Despite all these population growth limiting or reducing factors, Africa's overall population, which is already over 1 billion, is still growing quickly. And also various groups have accused various African governments of deliberately misreporting in order to give selected ethnicities numerical superiority, such as Nigeria's Hausa, Fulani, Yoruba, and Igbo people. A 2009 genetic clustering study which genotyped 1,327 polymorphic markers in various African populations identified 6 ancestral clusters. The clustering corresponded closely with ethnicity, culture, and language. A 2018 whole genome sequencing study of the world's populations observed similar clusters among the populations in Africa. At k = 9, distinct ancestral components defined the Afro-Asiatic speaking populations inhabiting North Africa and Northeastern Africa, the Nilo-Saharan speaking populations in Northeast Africa and East Africa, the Ari populations in Northeast Africa, the Niger-Congo speaking populations in West Central Africa, West Africa, East Africa, and Southern Africa, the Pygmy populations noted for their small stature in Central Africa, and the Khoisan populations in Southern Africa. So the Afro-Asiatic groups, substantially based on G.P. Murdoch's book, Africa, Its Peoples and Their Cultural History, published in 1959, would include the Hamitic or Berber and Cushitic and Semitic or Ethiopian and Arabic ethnic groups, and the Hausa or Chadic ethnic groups. The Niger-Congo ethnic groups would include the Bantu, Guinean, meaning Volta, Niger, Kwa, and Kru, Western Bantoid or Atlantic, Central Bantoid or Gur, Senufo, Eastern Bantoid or Southern Bantoid, and Mandi or Mande groups. The Nilo-Saharan groups would include the Nilotic, Central Sudanic, Eastern Sudanic, besides Nilotic, Kanuri, and Songhai groups. And then other Khoisan, Unity, Doubtful, Khoi, San, Sandawe, and Hadza, and also the Nilo-Saharan ethnic groups' unity is debated. The Malayo-Polynesian or Malagasy ethnic groups, and then the Indo-European ethnic groups, especially the Afrikaners or Boers, descendants of Dutch immigrants to South Africa, who also live to some extent, for example, in Namibia. And of course, have emigrated to, for example, North America, Europe, Australia, and New Zealand. Then let's go to Asia's ethnic groups. Since Asia has over 4 billion inhabitants and Asia's population is still growing rapidly, there are many, many ethnic groups. So, in Central Asia live, for example, Kazakhs, Kyrgyz people, Tajiks, Uzbeks, and Turkmens. Also, there are Mongolic, Indo-Iranian, and Turkic people. In East Asia, live mostly various Chinese people, Japanese, Mongolians, Koreans, and Taiwanese. And then, for example, the Bai, Hui, Tibetans, Manchus, Ryukyu, Kyuan, Ainu, Zhuang, and yes, and other ones. And of course, in the northern part of Eastern Asia lives a substantial Russian population. Although, yeah, so that's included under North Asia. And there are these Turkic and Mongolic and Tungusic people, Samoyeds, who are distantly related linguistically even to us Finns. In South Asia, the largest state in terms of its population especially, and also its area, is India. The Indian people are composed of many different ethnic groups. The 5 southern Indian states and northeastern Sri Lanka share a Dravidian culture due to the prominence of Dravidian languages there. The Brahuis of Pakistan also belong to Dravidian people group. Pakistanis are mostly Muslims by religion, and there are many Arabs living in Pakistan as well. Bangladesh and the Indian province of West Bengal share a common Bengali language and culture. Sri Lanka has 2 main ethnic groups, the Sinhalese and the Tamils. Then there are the Nepalese people. There are the Tibetans. The Bhutanese are often referred in their literature as Bote people, Bhutia or Botia or Tibet. In Southeastern Asia, there are Indonesians who are actually composed of many different ethnic groups, Malaysians, Filipinos who have also different ethnic or sub-ethnic groups or tribes, and of course Thais, Laotians, Cambodians, Vietnamese, Burmese, and others. In West Asia, Western Asia, which composes the major part of Middle East, there are Turks, Syrians, Georgians, Azeris, Tajiks, Kurds, who are one of the largest ethnic groups in the world, numbering over 30 million people by many estimates. to have no nation state. Then again, in Indonesia, I think the Sunda ethnic group also has over 30 million people and does not have an independent state. There are Druzes, there are Jews, of course, mostly in Israel. Palestinians and other Arabs living, for example, in Israel, the state of Palestine, in Jordan, and so forth. Then the Saudis compose a major ethnic group in the southern part of Western Asia, and Kuwaitis, Yemenis, Omanis or Omanians, inhabitants of the United Arab Emirates, and then Iranians or Persians. Culturally, Southern Asia's dominant ethnic groups are Arabs, about 150 million, according to Wikipedia. Turkic peoples, about 60 million. Persians, about 50 million, and Kurds, about 35 million. Other indigenous minorities include, for example, Azeris, about 20 million. Jews, over 6 million. Armenians, over 4 million. Assyrians, about 400,000. Greeks, about 600,000. Then Mandaeans, Yazidis, Circassians, and others. And then we go to the ethnic groups of Europe. Russians are probably by far the largest ethnic group in Europe, even if we exclude the large eastern part of Russia, which belongs to partly Central, but mostly Northern, and even in its eastern reaches, Eastern Asia. Russia, however, does have various minority ethnic groups as well. And then there are related Slavic ethnic groups, Belarusians or White Russians, Ukrainians, and less related ones, more distantly related ones, Poles, Slovaks, Czechs. And then Southern Slavs, such as Slovenes. One internationally famous Slovene is the current US First Lady, Melania Trump, born as Melania Knaus. Then Croats, Bosniaks, Serbs, Montenegrins, who are ethnically closely related to Serbs, and actually the so-called Bosnian Muslims are ethnically either Croats or Serbs, I have heard. Then there are Macedonians, or according to their homeland's new name, North Macedonians, because there's a province called Macedonia, or a historical region of that name in Greece. Then there are Albanians, both those of Albania and then of Kosovo, Greeks, then Bulgarians, Romanians, Hungarians, then of course Germans and Austrians, who are closely related to Germans, both genetically, historically, and culturally. Liechtenstein is peopled mostly by Alemannic Germans. In Switzerland, the ethnic and linguistic Germans are the major ethnic group, although there are significant minorities of French-speaking and small minorities of Italian and Romansh-speaking people. The Dutch people are closely related to the Germans, as are the Danes, Swedes, Norwegians, and to some extent Icelanders. In the British Isles, the people's ancestry is mixed, partly Celtic, partly Germanic, partly even Romance, principally Norman or traditionally Norman, and of course because of the recent immigration from various parts of Europe, North America, Latin America, especially the Caribbean, Africa and Asia, even Oceania, the British Isles, especially Britain itself, are mixed ethnically. In France, there are different ethnic heritages in northwestern France. The Breton ethnic group, a Celtic one, and then linguistically in southern France, there are the Occitans as well. There is the small, ethnically and linguistically isolated ethnic group called the Basques in northern Spain and southwestern France. The Spaniards are mostly, well, even they are ethnically mixed, the Catalans forming a major group among them. Then there are the Portuguese. Italians have different tribes, at least traditionally have had, such as the Tuscans, Sardinians, and Sicilians. Let's look at Europe more. And then, of course, in Northern Europe, we have those Finno-Ugric and Uralic ethnic minorities. We Finns, our close relatives, Karelians, Estonians, Ingrians, who are actually ethnically Finns. And then small ethnic groups such as the Votes or the Votic people, Vepsians, the almost extinct Livonians and Votic people are almost extinct as well. Then the Mordvins, the Mari people, the Sami or Lappish people, and so forth. According to German monograph Minderheitenrechte in Europa, or Minority Rights in Europe, co-edited by Pan and Pfeil, published in 2002, there are 87 distinct peoples of Europe, of whom 33 form the majority population in at least one sovereign state, while the remaining 54 constitute ethnic minorities. The total number of national or linguistic minority populations in Europe is estimated at 105 million people, or 14% of 770 million Europeans. And obviously, there are no universally accepted and precise definitions sorry, of the terms ethnic group and nationality. Especially in the context of European ethnography, the terms ethnic group, people, nationality, and ethno-linguistic group are used as mostly synonymous or even overlapping, although preference may vary in usage with respect to the situation specific to the individual countries of Europe.